This month I decided to do my presentation on pickadate.js, the mobile-friendly, responsive, and lightweight jQuery date input picker. Pickadate.js uses HTML5 input tags, CSS, and jQuery to present a simple yet beautiful pop-up modal that you can use to select a date, and it will input the date in the field. Alongside of pickadate is pickatime.js, created by the same author. Pickatime.js is a jQuery plugin for selecting time using a similar pop-up modal. Installation is fairly simple. You can use this link to go to the GitHub repo to download a zipped file and manually install it, or you can clone it, and it even supports the Bower installation package. So the required files for Pickadate and pickatime.js are the style sheets for both the date and time modals. Depending on whether you're going to use both will depend on whether you have to include both or only one or the other. There is also JavaScript files both for the a generalized picker.js option, and then if you were to use the date modal, you would need to include the date.js. If you use the time, you're supposed to include the time.js. jQuery is also required for any of these JavaScript files to run, so you need to make sure that you include that before any of the JavaScript files. Again, pickadate.js and pickatime runs on the HTML input tag. The class is only there to select it through jQuery. It's not required for any kind of CSS styling. You can use a class or you can use an ID. And you initialize the pickadate and pickatime.js inputs using the jQuery option shown below. So I'm going to go ahead and go over to the example that I created for this. I thought a good example for the pickadate and pickatime was a reservation widget within a, let's just say, making a reservation for a steakhouse. So this is the call to action, and as you can see, if you were to click the date, a nice little pop-up modal would appear. You can select the date of your reservation and you can select the time. So let's just make this for 7:30 p.m. and then I just added a select option menu for number of guests. Click make reservation. Nice little modal will appear that says we will see you on 17th of June 2015 at 7:30 p.m. with your party of 5 guests. Thank you for making a reservation with us. So going through some of the different options that Pickadate has available, you can actually choose the strings that that you appear. So rather than, I'll go back up just to give you the example. So on this, on the original example, you can see that Sunday is abbreviated to SUN. If you wanted to abbreviate it even more, if you wanted to change it entirely, you can by using the string option, and I'll show you what the code actually looks like here. So you would call the input date string with the pickadate modifier and actually spell out the strings for each weekday. You can also include for different translations. This one is French. Going back over to the example, select the translation, pickadate, modal. You can see that everything is spelled out in French. You can choose which buttons appear down at the bottom of the pop-up modal, and you can choose to include certain buttons and not include certain buttons by leaving an empty string. Going back, you can see that the Today button is no longer there because it was an empty string, and only the clear selection and cancel buttons appear. We can also choose to include drop-down selectors at the top of the pop-up modal by calling the select years key and selecting true. Just by default it is undefined, also for select years as well. We can also call the options to say which day of the week we want to begin on, whether that be a Sunday or a Monday. Just want to add that the first day key will either be a 0 or a 1. So you cannot choose you cannot make, say, Wednesday or Thursday be the first day of the week. It's not supported. We can choose date limits, so going to select the next pop-up modal, you can see that the 4th is our first day of June, and you can see that I'm actually using JavaScript dates in this example. So min date would be the 4th of June of 2015. The last date available will be the 28th of June. Going back, we can see that that's what it called. We also have the option to disable certain dates in the date picker. For this example, I decided to use an array of numbers rather than using the JavaScript dates. You can see I'm calling for disabling the 3rd of June, the 12th, and the 20th. Go back to our example. You can see that those days are grayed out and are not able to be selected. Lastly, we can also fire off events for the date picker and time picker. As you can see in our example, whenever I click on it, it fires an alert that says opened up. Going down to the time picker, our first option is to select the different formats. As you can see, choose which numbers are in bold, italics, whatever you basically want to do to how it appears. We can set time intervals, and these are in minutes. So our interval is 150 minutes. Going over to our example, you can see that everything is separated out and only those times are made available to us. We can also set time limits. Again, I'm using the JavaScript dates for this example. Going over to our page, see that time is restricted between 7 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. You can also disable certain times within the application itself. Again, using JavaScript dates for this one in particular. Certain times within the day are blocked off. Pick a time also supports the events, as you saw earlier in the pick a date event option. Briefly wanted to show you the source code behind my example. All of the style sheets for the date picker and time picker are located here. There's a default for both the date and time picker, and then there's also a date CSS file and a time CSS file. jQuery is required. I'm calling a CDN for it. And then also there is a general JavaScript file for both pickers and then each individual date and time picker. The date picker and time picker are both controlled using an HTML5 input tag. The date picker is highlighted there and the time picker is highlighted here. So scrolling down towards the bottom, I'm calling each one of those individually by a simple line of jQuery. For the time picker, I'm calling the class time picker pick a time, ID for the date picker, date input, pick a time. All of my other examples are located down here with the options